That's right, scholars. It is Monday, and welcome back to the House of Knowledge and to Narnia. We are about to see what is going on with our four friends and their two new friends, the Beavers. So let's jump right in to Narnia. Before we begin, I want to encourage you to look at the tab on our website called Other Resources. If you have not done so already, I have added a lot of fun resources related to Narnia under that tab. There are find a word puzzles, there is music, there are articles, and a lot of other fun things that I think you'll enjoy. So take a look at that, and I hope you'll enjoy using it. So, looking at chapter 8, after dinner, Lucy asked what happened to Mr. Tumnus, and Mr. Beaver proceeds to tell the grim story. It seems that Tumnus the Fawn has been kidnapped by the White Witch's police force and will likely be turned into a statue to stand in her palace forevermore. Well, the children want to help Mr. Tumnus, obviously. He rescued Lucy, but Mr. Beaver tells them that they would never be able to rescue Tumnus. He also tells them, however, that Aslan is the only hope and that he is capable of rescuing Tumnus. So naturally, the children, not being from Narnia, ask, what is Aslan? So the Beavers explain that Aslan is a lion. They further state that he's the king. He's the lord of the whole wood. Mr. Beaver states that he is to take the children to Aslan. And during the conversation, he quotes several various related prophecies. The Beavers explain further that the White Witch is not truly human. She only appears to be human. On her mother's side, she comes from a race of genies. On her father's side, she comes from a race of giants. But there is truly not a drop of human blood in her. In the midst of this conversation, they realize that Edmund has disappeared. So naturally, the three other children want to go and look for him, but the Beavers persuade them not to. The Beavers are convinced that Edmund has already gone to the White Witch and that her goal is to kidnap them to avoid being personally destroyed, as one of the prophecies foretells. Then they realize that they could be apprehended within minutes, and they all set out on the run together. Let's watch the final portion of this chapter as portrayed by the BBC.
Oh, where's Edmund? He's gone! Saw him last.
How long's he been missing, did you notice?
No, did you? His coat's not here. Perhaps he's outside. Edmund! 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 Edmund!
We must be off.
We'd better divide into search parties and all go in different directions.
What for?
Well, to look for Edmund, of course.
There's absolutely no point in looking for him. We know where he's gone. Don't you understand? He's gone to her, to the White Witch. Edmund has betrayed us.
He can't. He can't have done that.
Can't he?
Today, I want us to discuss two things about the chapter we have just read. First is the importance of the prophecies. You will notice that the Beavers quote several important prophecies to the children. A prophecy is a foretelling of the future, usually given by someone who is believed to be divine. If you read the Old Testament in the Bible, you'll see a lot of prophecies where God had told the prophets what to say to the king, and he was telling in a symbolic sort of way what was going to happen in the future. So that's what the Beavers are doing in their own way. These prophecies all point to the fact that Aslan will return and help them, get them out of captivity from the White Witch. These are the three prophecies which the beavers share. The first one says, wrong will be right when Aslan comes in sight. At the sound of his roar, sorrows will be no more. When he bares his teeth, winter meets his death. And when he shakes his mane, we shall have spring again. The second one says, when Adam's flesh and Adam's bone sits at Cair Paravel enthroned, the evil time will be over and done. The third one says, down at Cair Paravel, that's the castle on the seacoast down at the mouth of this river, which ought to be the capital of the whole country if all was as it should be. Down at Cair Paravel, there are 4 thrones, and it's a saying in Narnia time, out of mind, that when 2 sons of Adam and 2 daughters of Eve sit in those 4 thrones, then it will be the end not only of the White Witch's reign, but of her life. Once again, I went to the Spark Notes, and that's where you would go if you ever wanted to cheat on a book report. I am telling you not to cheat on book reports, but if you ever decided to cheat on a book report, this would be the source that you would use. Just saying. So in this chapter, we read a full description of Aslan. It is obvious that Aslan is the god of Narnia. His immortality, awesome power, and supreme benevolence is implied tacitly in the beaver's references to him. Couched in these terms, it is easy to see Aslan as a divine or godly power. However, C.S. Lewis deliberately avoids using these terms. Lewis simply describes Aslan as a great good king. The resulting effect is similar to the traditional feeling that a deity is inaccessible, remote, and lofty. These are the ways a child may feel about praying to a God that he or she is acquainted with solely through church. The story of Jesus is one important way to make God seem more tangible and less distant. So that was a little difficult to understand. What I'm getting at is this, by using that. In Narnia, Aslan was clearly prophesied or foretold, and the beavers believe that they are seeing this prophecy come to fulfillment. They believe that what the prophets said would happen now is happening. Perhaps this is symbolic of the Christian belief that the birth of Christ was foretold about 700 years earlier by the prophets Isaiah and Micah, who each wrote a book of the Old Testament. Perhaps that's what C.S. Lewis was alluding to when he wrote this. Here's a prophecy written by the prophet Isaiah in the Bible's Old Testament that many Christians believe points to the coming of Christ. Nevertheless, there will be no more gloom for those who were in distress. In the past, he humbled the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, but in the future, he will honor Galilee of the nations by the way of the sea beyond the Jordan. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned. You have enlarged the nation and increased their joy. They rejoice before you as people rejoice at the harvest, as warriors rejoice when dividing the plunder. And many scholars believe the darkness refers to sin and also the fact that Israel was conquered by other invading nations, and that the light represents Jesus, who would come and help them overcome that. Another prophecy, also from Isaiah, says this: therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and will call him Emmanuel. And many scholars believe that the virgin or lady he is referring to is Mary, the mother of Jesus, and Emmanuel is Jesus. This is a prophecy from Micah, also in the Old Testament. But you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, though you are small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come for me one who will be ruler over Israel, whose origins are from of old, from ancient times. And many scholars believe this was Micah foretelling the fact that Christ would be born in Bethlehem. So in plain English, this is what I'm saying. Perhaps when the beavers quote prophecies that foretell Aslan, C.S. Lewis is using this to symbolize the prophecies of Isaiah and Micah in the Old Testament of the Bible, which many Christians believe foretold the birth of Christ. The second thing I want us to discuss today is the importance of Edmund betraying the others. We read that Edmund stays with the group long enough to gather plenty of information. Then he just sort of disappears, and Mr. Beaver is pretty certain that Edmund has gone to the White Witch. The White Witch, as we remember, has promised him more Turkish delight if he will bring the others. When I read this, I immediately thought of Judas in the New Testament books of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, who was one of Jesus' disciples and betrayed him in a very similar manner. So I want to share a couple of scriptures about Judas and then give you something to think about. In Matthew 26, it says, Then one of the 12, the one called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and asked, What are you willing to give me if I deliver him over to you? So they counted out for him 30 pieces of silver. From then on, Judas watched for an opportunity to hand him over. Then John, who was one of Jesus' disciples, describes this event. After he had said this is when the disciples and Jesus are having dinner, Jesus was troubled in spirit and testified, Very truly I tell you, one of you is going to betray me. His disciples stared at one another at a loss to know which of them he meant. One of them, the disciple whom Jesus loved, he's referring to John, was reclining next to him. Simon Peter motioned to this disciple and said, Ask him which one he means. Leaning back against Jesus, he asked him, Lord, who is it? Jesus answered, It is the one to whom I will give this piece of bread when I have dipped it in the dish. Then, dipping the piece of bread, he gave it to Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot. As soon as Judas took the bread, Satan entered into him. So Jesus told him, What you are about to do, do quickly. But no one at the meal understood why Jesus said this to him. Since Judas had charge of the money, some thought Jesus was telling him to buy what was needed for the festival, or to give something to the poor. As soon as Judas had taken the bread, he went out, and it was night. So in plain English, here's what I'm saying on this one. Perhaps when Edmund slips away to, so we think, betray the others for some Turkish delight, it is symbolic of when Judas slips away out of the supper to betray Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. So both of these are theories about what C.S. Lewis was referring to. We can't go and ask C.S. Lewis because he's no longer alive. My first theory about the prophecies, I think, is pretty well supported among a lot of scholars. My second theory has some supporters and some who say no. There's scholars who believe both ways. So what I want you to do is think them over and then decide whether you agree or disagree with these two theories about what C.S. Lewis was doing. And do you have a different theory? So let's prepare for chapter 9 and look at a few vocabulary words. Speaking in British, barking means bumping. A dunce is a very stupid person. And if you've seen videos of school a long time ago, if a child did something dumb, they would make them wear the dunce cap, sit in the corner. We'd get fired if we did that today, but that's how they used to do things. A turret is a small tower. Gloating means feeling very satisfied and superior. We use that term here in America too. For example, if our football team beat North Parkway and we were running around just throwing it in their face afterwards saying, aha, we beat you, we would be gloating. Nobody likes to see people gloating, by the way. Satyrs is a mythical creature which is half man and half goat. I have never encountered a satyrs, and I hope I don't. Catamountains means mountain lions. A centaur is a mythical creature that is half man and half horse. I have never met one of those either, of course. Eerie means spooky. For example, if you're in an old house and it's dark, you might hear an eerie sound. Give him the cold shoulder means ignore him on purpose. In middle school terms, that's usually what your girlfriend does when she breaks up with you. She gives you the cold shoulder. So now that we are thoroughly educated in Narnian terminology, let's read chapter 9. This chapter I want you to look at from your own perspective as a reader from the outside. Your challenge question is, after reading chapter 9, what is your opinion of Edmund? Answer it in 1 to 2 proper and complete sentences and email your response to gekelley@jmcss.org for the shout out. I'm still getting a lot of great answers. You're making me really proud, scholars. And again, I want to encourage you to look at the Other Resources tab on the website. There's a lot of cool stuff I've added. And I'll see you tomorrow. Take it away, Bengals.